If you work for the Catholic Church and want to avoid burnout, overcome parish dysfunctions, and put more souls in the pews, we're here to help. I'm Ty Hua, here with my co-host, John Kahns, and this is the Catholic Ministry Professionals Podcast, the show that provides leadership development for Catholic churches. Each week, you can expect engaging discussions, expert interviews, and actionable advice to help you move Jesus' mission forward in your parish. John, how are you?
I'm good. I was just thinking, we have talked so many times about I wish we could have like the B sessions for the podcast, because there's so many good conversations when we have a guest on. They turn off the recording, and then they kind of take a deep breath, and then they tell you some of how they really feel. and I feel like we do that every time. There's always like a podcast worth of good conversation before and then after the podcast. And we should just keep it rolling for an extra 30, 40 minutes and just see what happens.
Well, I don't want to create more work for you in editing.
You know
So
what,
I think that's what happens.
Well, I think that's not a ton of work. I mean, what it would do actually is, if it's long enough, I'll just cut it in half, and then we've got two episodes right there.
Or three.
2 for 1.
Sometimes it's 3. Yeah.
It depends on how long-winded you are.
Yeah. What are we talking about today?
Today, we're going to talk a little bit about how our listeners, how our Catholic ministry professionals can have more joy and more success in their ministry. They can experience more joy and success in their ministry. And I think it's going to be really practical. Where this kind of came from for me, it was this a quote that I heard from Father James Mallon. He's tied in with Divine Renovation, and they do great work. I encourage all of our listeners, just Google Divine Renovation, James Mallon. They have a great book out there. Their focus is on moving churches from maintenance into mission, right? That's that whirlwind when you're just trying to get from Sunday to Sunday, from season to season, and you don't have time to do anything new that God is calling you to do, the new thing that he desires to do, that new work that he has placed in your heart. And if you don't have time for that, their work's all about that. And it really spurred on. I mean, that's a big part of us too, right? That's kind of one of the things that we're passionate about as well. Is if you are just going day after day, you're starting to feel a little burned out, you're tired of running into the same parish dysfunctions, which oftentimes becomes stumbling blocks for the conversations and the work that needs to happen to move the mission forward, then this episode is going to be for you. I really think and what Father James Mallon said is that parishes that are focused on mission are typically great at maintenance, because what they've had to do is figure out how to take all that maintenance work, that stuff that is just repetitive and happens over and over and over again. They've had to find ways to systematize that and make it efficient so that they have time for the mission. On the converse, parishes that are just focused on the maintenance, on getting through Sunday, they tend not to have time for mission. And that's what I want to talk about a little bit today, is how, if we can create that time, if we can put in place some rules for life and work, that then we can then create more time in our day. We can create more space to respond to the Spirit, and we can live more in the mission of Jesus Christ. And when we do that, we will experience more joy and more success in our ministries.
Let's do it.
Awesome. So the way I want to approach this is taking wisdom from the great saints, the great communities of the Catholic Church. I'm a big fan of Saint Dominic. He's the patron saint of my marriage. Right. It just was very clear that Saint Dominic has been pursuing my wife for a long time. And then through the context of discerning, he bubbled up to the surface, came out of nowhere, and became a part of our lives. And so St. Dominic, St. Benedict, St. Francis, all of these people who founded these communities, the Dominicans, the Franciscans, the Benedictines, they all have, if you want to be a part of their communion, this rule of life that allows them to really balance their life, balance their work, to really focus on the greater things, the higher things. But what it does is it orders your life under God and prioritizes the parts of life so that you are more free to just live that life. And the value of, in my mind, of having these things written down, putting them into rules in a sense, is not to hold yourself to some impossible standard. It's not to beat yourself for, enjoying things here and there. The point of writing it down is that it becomes easier to commit to, right? It becomes easier to communicate, hey, this is my rule for this, or hey, this is how I choose to live and why I live this way. And I think especially in the context of work, if you have rules for work, It becomes easier to say to your coworkers, like, hey, at this time, I have this time blocked out from 9 to 10 in the morning on Tuesdays where I'm going to be focused on this activity. I'm going to lock my door. It's not that I'm mad at you, but don't bother me, right? It becomes
Mhm.
easier to communicate expectations. You also have the opportunity with these rules is you can really, for you, you're not creating a new community that's going to live with you. You can build it from the ground up. You can, and it's easy to, it's completely customizable, right? You can make it what you need it to order yourself towards that success, that joy, ultimately towards virtue and towards holiness. So I want to break it into two pieces here. We're going to talk about a rule of life and we're going to talk about a rule of work. I think this is super important because so much of the burnout that happens in the church actually comes about from having imbalance between work and life. Ultimately, imbalanced in terms of your prayer and your sleep. And I think those are two huge things. So I want to first start with your life. If you're going to try and lead others, you need to first lead yourself. Nobody wants to follow somebody that isn't authentic. Nobody wants to follow somebody that isn't the person that they believe them to be, that isn't trying to live what they preach. And so you need to first get your life in order, get your house in order. So this is something I did a number of years ago, and it's created a lot of freedom for me. And it came about as just kind of my own desire to grow in holiness, my own desire to grow in virtue, and just realizing that I have habits, and sometimes these habits, they can either lead me towards the kingdom of God or away from the kingdom of God. And I wanted to just put in place some different habits that would help me. And one of these habits I do think is one of the most important ones was setting a bedtime for myself. Because how many of us, how what was that look for?
Keep going.
Well, how many of us go to bed, but then we're on our phone for the next 15, 20, 30 minutes scrolling through our phones. Or we say we're going to go to bed, but then we end up watching just one more show. And what that does is it makes us tired, right? We lose out on sleep when we do that. So instead of getting the sleep that we need to be the person that we need to be tomorrow, to be that solid husband, that solid father, that solid coworker, that solid brother, whatever it might be, we end up being tired. And that makes it that much harder to follow through on being patient and kind and loving. And so I realized I really need my sleep and I had to put guardrails in place. Right. And so I started defining, okay, what's a good amount of sleep for me? And how do I begin to build that in? And I started to build it from there too. Okay, well, the reason I want my sleep actually is so that I can be fully attentive when I come to prayer in the morning. And so I set my prayer time, and then based off that, I set my bedtime, right? And I started to just incorporate other things, for example, what's my routine when I go to bed? There's a few things I need to remember. I want to walk around and lock the doors. And I like to set the coffee pot. I don't always remember, but then the coffee's ready when I wake up in the morning. Uh, Putting down for my sleep. Okay, I want to sleep this number of hours. So I'm gonna kind of build my timeline around that. What happens if I can't sleep from 1 to 3? How am I going to fill that time? Am I going to just stay in bed? And this is again, it's all what is best for you in focusing on your growth in virtue, your growth in holiness, and realizing that well, if I just get on my phone and I scroll around, that I don't think smartphones are good for my soul, right? And so I could get up and I can watch a TV show, or should I get up and pray? And it's just thinking through these rhythms of life so you can create these rules so you can live. Other areas that I've begun to incorporate include exercise. Okay, how often do I want to exercise? Because I actually believe that caring for your body, and we know that caring for your body has an effect on your soul, right? It's part of that maintenance of the passions, that reining in of the passions and ordering them towards good. Your body's a temple of the Holy Spirit. You want to order that towards the good. So I want to work on my body so that I can be a man at service to others when they need me, right? To be strong for my kids and my family should I need to protect them, but also to be limber so that I can get up and down off the ground as we're having babies and I need to get down on the floor to make a puzzle with my 1-year-old. Whatever it is, right? These are things that are now rules for my life, and all of them, they order me towards virtue, they order me towards holiness. All of them give me freedom to live the way that I want to live. They kind of define what I see as being a really optimal way to live so that I can give honor and glory to God with my every moment. So I've also put guidelines in for food, right? I don't want to gain a ton of weight as, my metabolism slows down and I get older. So I've defined like, hey, this is when I do eat, this is when I don't eat. And what that does, it gives me freedom. Like I'm hungry at 2 p.m. Well, guess what? I don't eat at 2 p.m. Right? So I've defined those rules and it gives me something to follow and to follow through on. Alcohol, right? I have rules on alcohol. I had to write down like, hey, never drink a bourbon to medicate a bad day. But you can drink a bourbon to celebrate a good day, right? Um, how many is too many, right? Never to excess. Right. So again, defining all these things that allow me to live a holier, healthier life. Because again, the other side is 2 bourbons is not too much for me, but if I have 2 bourbons, I might be more sluggish the next day, right? So understanding what that line is, and then again, building in rules for you to flourish as a human person so that you can come to work, to the vineyard, to build the kingdom with the best of yourself. And it's all about kind of ordering towards that. And so that's kind of like different elements of my real life. And the reason I just bring that out is because there are some different areas you might want to speak into, and some of those do include, like I went through, your sleep routine, your prayer routine, your phone usage, your exercise. Phone usage, I think, is a huge one. I recently wrote in there, just don't even pick up the phone after 8 p.m. Because that's the time my wife and I have after the kids go to bed to just be together. So if I have my phone, I'm not giving her my full attention in whatever capacity it's needed that night. And so that's a new rule for me. Exercise, food, alcohol, and then just free time. Like if you find yourself with an hour or two of free time, what are the things that you should be doing, should be working on? How does that hit you, Ty? I'm just kind of throwing that out as kind of guardrails for how we build virtue and holiness in our lives.
Well, the first thing that comes to mind is discipline. It all comes down to discipline, no matter if it's, your rule of life or
Mm.
rule of work that we're gonna get into. Discipline, put it in a better way, it is the best way to love yourself, right? You're using delayed gratification of, "Hey, I don't want that 3rd bourbon or 2nd bourbon, 4th, 5th," whatever you wanna call, excess, but you're putting that out because you love yourself so much that you don't wanna have a bad day tomorrow. You're exercising today because you love yourself enough that you wanna be around for your kids in 20, 30, 40 years. So, the rule of life is essentially disciplining yourself in a way that you are showing self-love. It's self-care. Now, the other thing that kinda popped into my head was this, and I don't know if it's true or not, but, there's a story about Elon Musk and how he interviewed people. It might have been somebody else, some other billionaire, I don't know. But I love this idea, where when he interviewed you for a job, he would actually just follow you around. I don't think it's true because Elon Musk doesn't have this much time, but he would follow you around at home, right? How did you take care of your house? How did you take care of your car? How did you maintain, um, different aspects of your life, whether that's relationship or commitments? Like, are you on time? Are you punctual? Are you uh, showing signs that potentially could be problematic in working with him or working for him? So if you don't get your house in order first, and now you're trying to put the house of God in order, boy, oh boy, are you going to be in for um, one of two things. The what is it? The shoot, I can't think of the word. Um, imposter syndrome, right? Like, oh, I've got this huge job at church where I'm being held accountable on these different things, but when I go home, it's chaotic. It's a mess. Well, imposter syndrome is going to kick you square in the face. The other thing that will happen is that your standards are lower, right? If your standard for work is way higher than at home, you've got it backwards, right? And then we can get into the whole domestic church issue, all these different things, but those are the things that come to mind when you talk about the rule of life or rule for life or however you want to say it. One other thing that stood out is when you're talking about when you can't sleep at 1 to 3 a.m., maybe you watch all the reels I send you.
No, ain't nobody got time for that, Ty. I'm so far behind.
You have to be disciplined.
If I want to catch up on the reels you send me.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, that discipline that really strikes a chord with me, and I think the beauty of this again is you can make it what it needs to be to help you to grow in holiness and virtue and do that good work of your soul to continue to customize,
To
not customize,
cuss. To
cultivate,
cuss.
cultivate. Yeah, honestly, that's what I need to put in. Don't cuss, but I get plenty of people reminding me that. But you can really like it becomes this place, it becomes this storage place that reminds me of who you are called to be. And even for myself, I've put at the top of it these two guiding principles is that I want to be in my rule of life radically available to my family and radically intentional with my time so that I can make the best of what God has given me. Because I don't know. I mean, I'm probably at the halfway point now here in my life. And so I really do want to use what I have left for the glory of the kingdom and for the flourishing of my family. And that's really about it. So again, this rule of life, I think lead yourself and then let that pour out towards leading others. And that's where we can kind of roll here into a rule of work, which I think is so much of what we already talked about, but it's just thinking about structuring it in a different way. And that rule of life, I think a good starting point for that, if you're not sure, because yeah, what does that even mean? Or the rule of work, what does that even mean? It's putting in guidelines. Means putting in guardrails for your work. It means, really protecting the time that you have and stewarding it well and doing good works for the kingdom. And a great place to start is honestly just going to our website, to catholicministryprofessionals.com/resources, and downloading the only planner sheet you ever need. Because on that planner sheet, you've got those different ways to organize your work. It's just a simple framework for beginning to add structure into your day so that it becomes predictable, so it becomes manageable, it becomes something you can continue to refine. Because if you're just showing up and you got a list of 40 things that you need to do every day and you're just shooting from the hip, trying to maintain and like get through Sunday, it's going to continue to be the whirlwind. If you can put some structure to it, if you can put some guardrails around it, then you actually have a way to begin to make it better. And as you refine it, as you condense that into smaller chunks of time, then you'll be able to have space for the more missional and more important things in work. So the way the planner sheet, the way it works is essentially you get to schedule work blocks into your week. You're putting on that planner sheet, you're just putting different buckets of types of work that you have to do. So when those work chunks come up, when those scheduled work blocks come up, you just open up that bucket, start working on those things. And since you've already prioritized them, put them in order of importance, you just know I pick up this one first because it's marked number one, right? And then I pick up number two because that's marked number two. All right. Now, I would say, the beauty of this again that I mentioned before is if it's on paper, it's easy to communicate and set expectations. And I think that is down the board. One of the places that stumbling blocks, frustrations at work come from the most is mismanaged expectations. Again, if you have these work buckets scheduled, these work blocks scheduled in your calendar, it's really easy to tell your coworkers, "Hey, I'm busy at this time." It also becomes easy to discuss when you have other issues that come up. Say someone comes in and they really want to talk to you, but the front office person, because they love you and they're a good coworker, says they're not available at this time. What you can also kind of start to write in and kind of think through is, well, actually, I want to be available for the person that comes in. If someone made the effort to come to the office, they're the priority. So again, it allows you to have those conversations with more clarity with your coworkers, with your staff, with your team, and with your parishioners, right? So as you continue to refine this rule of life, you're going to want to include other things such as your phone use, your email norms, right? Maybe you're somebody who really wants to prioritize. I'm going to get all emails responded to within 24 hours. You can communicate that. Or if you're part time and you need 2 or 3 days to respond to things because you're only in the office a couple times a week, then you can communicate that to people either. Either way, it's managing those communications, it's managing those expectations in a way that people know what to expect from you. And if they have issues, that you can say, oh, you know what, this is actually how I operate. And I want to be very clear and honest with you and upfront about that. This is how it works. Same with your phone use, Um, are you someone who can have this thing on your desk in front of you and ignore it for large chunks of time? Or are you somebody that if it's there and it pings over at you, you're going to pick it up, you're going to look at it, and then you're going to get lost on social media for 20 to 30 minutes? Write that down for yourself so you can continue to remind yourself, no, I am not a person who checks their phone at all hours of the day. I'm going to put my phone up over here or in the other room. I'm going to put it in a drawer in the kitchen, whatever it might be. But you're really putting those guardrails around so that you can bring more of yourself intentionally into that moment of time in your work schedule. Um, the other things I think that are valuable for a rule of work is to consider, who you're going to ask to keep you accountable, right? Because if you want to continue to grow, you have to involve some accountability, and it's worth writing that down, if for nothing else, so that you remember to ask that person to keep you accountable. It could be your pastor, it could be your coworkers, it could be a peer in ministry at another parish and say, "Hey, I'm doing this thing. Can you keep me accountable to this?" Every time we talk, I want you to ask me these two things, like, "Hey, how's work? How's your prayer? How's whatever?" I want you to keep me accountable to these three things. The other thing could potentially be that you want to hire Catholic ministry professionals to come in and help keep you accountable to uh, like a rhythm of transformation at your parish, that you're going to continue to grow as a professional, and you're going to try and transform your parish through your work. You can hire us to do that, and you can always send us an email to catholicmenpros@gmail.com if you want to start that conversation. Now, other things that could be in your work, your rule of work, is your routine of discernment. And I think that's really important, is to put down on paper, what am I going to be doing to intentionally discern what God is calling me to do in my ministry and in my work. Because yes, you have your day-to-day stuff, but God is always creative. He's always renewing things, right? He brings that spirit of freshness, of refreshment in. And if we're not going to the well to drink, that's a problem. So you really need to put in your rule. Okay, what is your rhythm? Are you going to take time every day to pray at the parish? I think that's perfectly valid. I think that's a good thing. But that's not your personal prayer time. That's time to pray intentionally for the parish, to discern what God is calling you to do and the direction for your ministry. It's not personal prayer, it's your work prayer. It may also include scheduling time with your pastor, with a spiritual director, and that those are parts of your work day. Those are parts of the rhythm of your work. All right. Another one, just your own personal growth. And this is different from discernment. You need to schedule time in where you are going to learn. You need to schedule time in where you're going to say, like, once every quarter, I'm going to take time, or every quarter, I want to pick up a new skill. So I'm going to schedule time in an hour a week. Maybe it's an hour every 2 weeks. Maybe it's once a month. You're going to take 2 or 3 hours, whatever it is. But based on your discernment, there may be skills you need to learn that allow you to move into that next thing that God is calling you into. It's an area that you need to grow in knowledge, a skill you need to learn to operate something at the parish, whatever it is. Schedule that time block in, so it's safeguarded for you. It's part of your rule of work, that every month I'm doing XYZ. All right. Same with your strategic planning. This could be another area of your rule of work, is just understanding that I think it's appropriate to schedule a day or a half a day quarterly to take a quote unquote retreat day, right? Take a day where you're really going to sit down, you're going to review your plan, your rule of work, and you're going to refine it, right? You're going to sit down, you're going to identify a goal that you want to work towards, and you're going to make a plan of action that you can schedule into your calendar and take action on, right? So these are all elements of that rule of work, that, again, it's another way of thinking about how to build your work day so that you can execute on the mission of Christ, that you can hopefully experience more joy and success in your day-to-day work life. Did you have something? You're leaning in.
I did, but I was trying to formulate how I was going to say it. So all these rules. You remember the movie Remember the Titans?
Oh yeah.
So like Denzel Washington comes in and he's got all of these different pressures outside of, I should say, before actually coaching. But he's got these rules for these guys before they go to this huge training camp, and obviously there's some racial um, themes that they're working through in the movie. But it was like, you got to wear a suit and tie. If you don't have one, uh, go to the thrift store. If you can't afford the thrift store, go buy one off of the bum on the corner of the street, because he dresses better than most of you guys on this team. So like he's got all of these rules for him that at the outset of this, they're probably thinking this is stupid, as you can see from the different reactions from the guys. But as they buy into these rules for being on the team and the standard of them winning every game, as they win, the rules are reinforced, right? We won because we set a standard and we're adhering to the standard. Now, if if you lose, right, then you can question it, or you can go back to say, "No, I just need to be more disciplined." So as we're talking through these rules, the only thing I could think of is Remember the Titans, where they talk
Mhm.
about that. Or another good movie is Coach Carter. That's another good one where at the start, he comes in, he's a radical because he's setting all these rules. Like it's unprecedented. Like, can we just talk about basketball? Can we talk about football? Like, yeah, but before we do that, we have to have a, a standard for who we are as people, right? No different here. Can we just talk about ministry? Can we get back to winning souls? Yeah, but let's get our house in order first. Let's talk about how we can set the standard on being good Catholics to lead others to being good Catholics.
Oh, and that's the story of Christianity, right? Or being Catholic too. We have all these arbitrary rules,
Mhm.
right? Other people, non-denominational people from Protestant churches, they look, well, you guys have all these rules, and they can feel really arbitrary, but the truth is that they are ordered towards something, right? They are ordered towards your flourishing as a human person, right? And kind of the classic example, if I have a guitar in my hands, am I free to play it? Well, I mean, if I have the guitar in my hands, but I don't know how to play it, I can strum on it, but I'm not really playing it. Whereas true freedom is when you have refined the skills, right? You have adhered to the norms, the rules of the guitar that when I put my hand like this, I'm making a G chord, right? And then I can play that G chord with freedom. And the more you know, the more you have adhered to those, the more you've disciplined your mind and your body to use that instrument, the more free you are to play it. Right, and so, yeah, absolutely, that's an excellent point to make, and also, some pieces to follow up on this is that it's not about these rules aren't about being perfect, right? It's more about balancing your life in a way that enables growth and holiness, growth and virtue, excellence in your ministry, and virtue doesn't live in the extremes, right? That's when we run into something like scrupulosity, right? Virtue doesn't live in the extremes, it lives right in the middle. That's temperance. That's a virtue, right? So it's not about beating yourself up because you didn't live up to the standard necessarily, or you didn't fully follow through on everything. You're not setting yourself up and making oaths to the Lord where you're going to feel sinful, where you're heaping hot coals on your head because you didn't follow through on X, Y, Z. And I would say if you're bringing condemnation on yourself because you forgot to do this thing or you didn't have time to do this thing, it's not about bringing condemnation on yourself or heaping those coals on your head because you're not getting things done. All that means to me is that you need to refine things. You need to retool things. You need to sit back down and spend some time going, okay, are these actually leading me the direction that I feel that the Lord is calling me to go?
Mm, so good.
So with that, I think it's time for the devil's advocate. Dun dun.
John, all these routines sound just ridiculous. They're rigid. I just need more flexibility in my day. Like, what do you say to somebody like that?
yeah, I it does. Initially, I think it sounds and seems kind of counterintuitive that you would put more structure in your day to give you more freedom. But the truth is, and over again, my experience has shown me that if you become more intentional with your time, you actually have more time for the more important things in your ministry. One of the biggest complaints I hear from ministry professionals is that they are too busy already to begin the new things they feel called to do. But if you want to have the time to do those new things that God is calling you to, then you need to get out of maintenance mode where you're just running the rat race, where you're just caught in the whirlwind and you don't have time. You need to get yourself out of that maintenance mode and into missional effectiveness. And in order to do that, you got to schedule concrete things in your day. You got to be more intentional with your time, and you have to make your schedule so concrete that you're no longer just having these desires in your heart, but that you actually have time to implement them into your day. And that's the whole point of adding the structure in, is not so it's so rigid that you can't do anything, but that you have actually made these things concrete moments in your day so that you have the freedom to go out and do more for the kingdom.
What I would say is that these boundaries that we're setting up are actually going to free us. It will give us more time. One of the sayings that, since becoming a Christian, it's made a lot of sense to me. And one of those sayings is, if the devil can't make you bad, he's going to make you busy. Again, I'm saying it. If the devil can't make you bad, he's going to make you busy. And who's he going to attack more than anybody? It's people that are leading others to heaven. So if he can't make you one of his followers, he's going to distract you and keep you from being efficient in converting souls. Overcoming team dysfunctions, avoiding burnout, and putting more souls in the pews. That's what we're here to do as Catholic ministry professionals. And we've got somebody that is trying to prevent us from doing that. So what is he going to do? He's going to make you more and more busy. Now, John, let me ask you, have you ever had a day where you felt so busy that you didn't get anything done?
Yeah. Every day of my life.
Exactly. With these rules for life and rules for work, if we can implement them and use them and hold ourselves accountable to those rules, it's going to be self-gratifying. It's going to be gratifying to parish life. It's going to be gratifying to the kingdom. So the devil is in your head saying these routines are so rigid. You need more flexibility in the day so that if anything comes up, you can do blah, 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 blah. Really, what he's trying to do is, I'm going to put so many different things in front of you. You're not going to get any one of them done. You're going to get frustrated. You're going to get peeved at your coworker. You're going to lash out at some point when it gets a little bit too burdensome. And that's going to fit right into my plan because eventually, when you get burnt out, if you continue down this path, I'm going to pull you away from the church. And if I don't pull you away, I'm going to pull the people that you're trying to bring to the church away. And then what do I have to worry about? So that's what I think about when people complain about the rigidity of routine. Well, the routine frees us, right? Just like the um, different rules of the church, right? It's not because Mother Church says no, you shouldn't sin, right? Because it's a bad thing, but because it separates us from the love of God, right? All these rules are to help us to not be enticed to go against the will of God. So all of these different rules, however you put them together, these rules of life, these rules of work, they're going to free you to do the Lord's work in the vineyard.
That'll preach.
Mm,
All right. How about some actionable steps here?
I would love that.
Of course, we never want you, dear listener, to walk away from an episode without something that you can put into motion today to further the mission in your church. And so for today's actionable steps, there's a couple things that I want you to do. The first is just to open up a Google Doc. Keep it simple, and you're going to create 2 separate lists. And you start writing down your own rules of life and your rules for work, things that are doable, right? They need to be attainable. But things that you can put into place that can help you to use your time more efficiently, more effectively. Go ahead and listen to the podcast again. Go back through the meat of that podcast and just kind of, start creating rules under some of those areas to get your brain going and thinking. But make it what it needs to be so that you can grow in virtue, you can grow in holiness, and that as you look at your work, you can see that you are doing good work for the kingdom so that you can bear more fruit. And there's 2 things I want you to do with that list as you make it. I want you to start scheduling and setting deadlines, right? Putting things in the calendar related to your rules of life and work. So if you know that you need an hour to prep for religious ed, or you need an hour to prep for mass on the weekend, or whatever it is, schedule that in, make that a time block, safeguard that for yourself so that you can begin to put that structure in place and you can begin to depend on it. You can start to understand and have the freedom to live in that schedule. The second thing I want you to do after scheduling deadlines is to hang your rules where you can see them every day, multiple times a day, because when you see it, it will remind you, it will help to keep you accountable, but it will remind you that, oh, this is how I live. This is how I work. And it can help keep you personally accountable to the things that you know will help you to flourish.
So good.
And with that, thank you for listening to the Catholic Ministry Professionals podcast. If you want to transform your parish through your work, but you're not sure where to start, Download the free parish health assessment at catholicministryprofessionals.com/podcast. Oh, /free assessment. It's 36 questions, and it only takes about 5 minutes to fill out. Afterwards, you will have a color-coded picture of your parish's health that you can use to fuel better conversations, prioritize better work, and become a better leader. You can email us at catholicminpros@gmail.com to share feedback. And finally, don't forget to text this episode to a priest or a friend in ministry that can benefit from it.
With that, we'll see you in the vineyard.